Hey guys, Adam with the Truth Desk here, and we got a great one for you. We've got the real Nick Fuentes. Now, a lot has been said about Nick Fuentes over the last year or so. I actually didn't know who Fuentes was until this last year, and once I saw this huge effort by some people to demonize him and to cancel him and to ostracize him, it made me very curious on who he really was. I should point out, I am not a supporter of Nick Fuentes. I think some of his ideas are interesting, and I probably would agree with him on some things. Other things I'm totally different, vastly different on Fuentes. But when I saw this huge effort to cancel him, I thought, well, let me learn more about him, right? Because when I see something like that, when I see a bunch of people pushing in one direction, it makes me wonder why. What's your purpose in doing that? And so it made me really curious on Nick and why he was being canceled. I've watched all the major interviews with Nick. I've watched some of his Rumble streams, and I've learned a lot about him. I've learned a lot about his views and his opinions, and they actually are not. He's not genocidal. He's not a maniac. He certainly has, pretty right-wing views some of the time and conservative, but he is not a genocidal maniac that people like Ben Shapiro or Mark Levin or Josh Hammer make him out to be. He's just a pretty, I guess probably 50 years ago or so, he would have been considered a mainstream conservative, and today people call him, a fascist or whatever. It is also interesting to point out just how popular the guy is, and this whole position that everyone takes where we don't platform trolls. Well, you're not platforming him. There's a decent amount of people that listen to him and agree with him, and if people keep not talking to this guy, his following is just going to keep growing and growing. And we have to stop thinking that we can just cancel people. We can just tell people, oh, he's a racist, he's a bigot, he's a misogynist, we should cancel him. If you really disagree with him on his positions, then you need to debate him. You need to let the debate floor be your proving ground and not just rely on outside forces to cancel him. I mean, if we just look here at his following, here's Rumble. Here's Rumble. We can see how many views the guy's getting. 19 hours ago, he's got almost over 500,000 views here on this one alone. All of his videos on Rumble. He's got, 500,000, 750,000. I mean, the guy has a decent following. Let's just look at Tucker's videos here too. Here's the interview of him. 5.4 million views. Okay? Nowhere else do we see that many views on any of Tucker's videos. This one's got almost 1 million. Just look. It's Tucker's expose on 9/11 cover-up conspiracy. It's got 2.1 million. That was very popular. Nowhere else in Tucker's YouTube channel and this interview just came out, and it's already got 5.4 million views. And then look here at Dave Smith. 1.8 million on the interview that he did with Dave Smith. Now, this one's not as good as the Tucker interview. They spend a lot of time going over personal grievances, but look how many more views it has than any other video that Dave Smith has put out. Now, I will say, too, the Tucker Carlson Nick Fuentes interview that we're about to watch and respond to is the best Nick Fuentes interview of all time. Anyone else that debates Nick Fuentes, be it Dave Smith, be it Candace Owens, they just spend the entire time airing out personal grievances. Well, you said this on your show. Well, that's because you said this. Blah, 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 blah. It's just a lot of back and forth bullshit that, quite frankly, most people don't care about. And Tucker could have made that interview exactly like that. Tucker could have spent the whole time saying, you said this about my dad. You said I was in the CIA. Which, by the way, if you're curious about the history of the feud, I'll throw that up there. I do have a video on that. But Tucker doesn't do that. Tucker just asks him, for the most part, about his views and opinions, which I enormously respect. When this whole thing first came out, I looked into Tucker and I looked at his CIA connections and his dad, and I kind of had some, I wasn't quite sure about him. And I think I even commented on a couple of his videos. I'm like, just have Nick on, blah, blah, blah. And I was like that'll ever happen. And then, like a lot of us, I just woke up one day, logged into YouTube, and it said Carl Tuckerson interviews Nick Fuentes. And I was like, holy shit, he fucking did it. And I got to tell you, I have a whole new appreciation for Tucker Carlson after this. Any thoughts that I had that Tucker was in the CIA or working for the CIA are mostly gone. And I just, a big round of applause for Tucker for doing this. And Tucker's experienced an extreme backlash after this. People are attacking him on Twitter. People are attacking him on their channels and their platforms. And, I just got to say, I really think people need to come together in defense of Tucker Carlson on this, because he showed some true. I don't think people can understand. I mean, his phone's probably blowing up. His people are calling him, texting him. I mean, from everything I know about Tucker, he probably doesn't care about that, but showed some real true courage to do these interviews with Nick Fuentes. And I do want to point out too, in terms of the personal attacks that you see Nick engaged in a lot, you might say, well, I don't like him because he attacks people all the time. There's all kinds of clips of him saying nasty things about people, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, just to name a few. Why does he do that? Well, you have to understand, Nick was thrown off of all meaningful social media, and he was just streaming on this obscure little site called Cozy TV. Now, to get noticed on social media in that environment, you have to attack people. You're not going to get anywhere by being a cheerleader, by being apologetic, by being moderate. What's really going to make you stand out is saying extreme things, and then people are going to share your clips, and then people are going to start talking about you more. And that also speaks to how social media works. YouTube is the exact same way, actually. If I made this video something incredibly negative about Nick, or maybe not Nick, if I made a video that was incredibly negative about, let's say, Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson, if I had a very negative title and thumbnail, it would do much, much better than having I think Joe Rogan's great type video, okay? You get much more engagement and curiosity out of negative press than you do positive. So that's one of the reasons why Nick is kind of so grifty, or maybe he has been up until now. I think he's changing slightly, but one reason that he comes out attacking people a lot is he had to survive. I mean, that's the only way people are going to pay attention to him. So just want to point that out there. Now let's get into my analysis of Nick Fuentes and the Tucker Carlson interview.
So I went to Boston University. I got on campus in September, and I was wearing my MAGA hat everywhere, in the dining hall, walking down the street. But so I was wearing my hat everywhere, and I was just getting accosted constantly. In the dining hall, people would come up and yell in my face. Some black girl in a hijab ran up to me and said, "You know what you're supporting? You're racist, this." And I'm trying to get my pizza, I'm trying to get my oatmeal or whatever at the dining hall. So one of these guys from the campus libertarian group, Young Americans for Liberty, he reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I'm not going to say his name, but he goes, I go to a school in Boston. I'm from YAL." He said, "And I'd like to set up a debate with you and one of these people that's been giving you a hard time on campus," because they were doing a lot of events. And I decisively win the debate. It's like not even close. The debate wraps up, and this girl who I think I had talked to her on Twitter once or twice comes running up to the stage after the debate, and it's Cassie Dillon. And at this time, she's a fellow at Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's company. And like I said, I barely knew her. And she comes running up and she says, "Oh my gosh, I live streamed this debate on Periscope on Twitter." She said, "And 30,000 people watched it, and you have like 5 job offers. You did incredible." And she's plugged in, like I said, at Daily Wire. She's talking to people at Right Side Broadcasting Network, the college Republicans. I start to develop this friendship with her. And over time, she lands me this show on Right Side Broadcasting Network. And there was one thing that happened just before that. Barack Obama, in the lame duck period, so the Democrats lost the election. He's on his way out. There's a resolution of the Security Council condemning the settlements in the West Bank in Israel. And typically, the U.S. delegation will veto those resolutions condemning Israel. Well, Obama's on his way out. He's got nothing to lose. So the U.S. delegation abstains from the resolution, and it passes. All Obama did was uphold U.S. policy on the West Bank that we've had since '67, which is we don't support the settlements. I said, how is it anti-Semitic to just be consistent on our U.S. foreign policy? Like I said, which is a Republican-Democrat consensus. And I got attacked for this. I wrote a big article about this. I tweeted about it. And so they started paying attention to me, and the more critical of Israel I started to get this really intense pushback.
So you're an 18-year-old college freshman, you're clearly talented and you're engaged, you're really interested, and you ask not crazy questions like, what is this? Mm-hmm. And rather than explain it, they just call you a racist, call you an anti-Semite.
I just want to point this out here too. Tucker's interview room, it looks kind of like, look, he's got the antlers here. He's got I don't know what that is. That's like a cutlass or something. He's got like a oar or some sort of wooden sword there. He's got another sword there. And then there's a couple rifles up here. It kind of, and then with the antlers here, it almost looks like he's going to do an interview and then be like, oh, and by the way, I'm going to hunt you for sport after this. Like, what's that book? It's a short story, The Most Dangerous Game, where they... I mean, doesn't this kind of put off that vibe? They're just like, all right, chap, you got a 10-minute head start. So that beginning sequence that Nick just told you about his early life, being at college, being kind of ostracized from his fellow students because of his political beliefs, wearing the MAGA hat, which I remember back then, 2016, it was extremely unpopular to be a Trump supporter unless you were like in rural America or something. The media kind of emboldened all of these anti-Trump people to walk up to Trump supporters on the street and talk negatively to them or attack them or call them racist. I mean, people, the leftists in the country at that time were very, very emboldened. The media kind of emboldened them, and the media made it seem like everyone thought that. Like, if you were a Trump supporter, you were just an idiot. They skewed the polls. Trump talks about this a lot too, about how like every poll that Trump's had for his presidency has showed him losing by like 5 points. And then all of a sudden when he wins, they say, oh, pollsters got it wrong. Whoops. It's like, well, actually probably what's going on there is these pollster people are influenced or paid to show Trump losing so that people don't go out and vote for him. Well, whatever. He's already losing by five points or 10 points. Why go out and vote for him? It's just a waste of time. But anyway, so that's the environment that Nick is going to school in, wearing his MAGA hat, and people coming up and yelling at him. He's used to everyone attacking him. He has that debate. He goes on to Daily Wire, and then shortly after being at, kind of in the Daily Wire crowd, he gets canceled. All the people that he thought were his friends, all the people that he thought he was just talking to and having, a good spirited debate with, they cancel him. They throw him out in the cold, right? And not only do they cancel him, not only do they like take away the benefits that they have given him, they completely ostracize him. They blacklist him. They make it to where he can't come on, Fox and Friends. He can't have a social media account, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. He's even taken off YouTube eventually. He's uneligible for a PayPal account, for a Bank of America account. He's put on the no-fly list. I mean, just imagine that. You're a teenager, essentially a teenager, and you're almost completely ostracized from society itself. A lot of people in this situation would end up going and living in their parents' house for a time. I think he did, actually. When he first started his show, he was in his parents' basement. But a lot of people would just kind of sink into a depression and then eventually go work like nights at a local factory or something to make ends meet. Nick really pulled himself up by his bootstraps and overcame all of this. I mean, to where he's a legitimate political force today. So that just tells you something about his grit and his resolve to push through that, which I don't agree with all his political views, but I can definitely admire somebody that can overcome that amount of attack, especially early on in your life. And again, you can clip Nick from back when he was 18, 19. You can find these clips of him kind of joking about things that, we would argue you maybe shouldn't be joking about, or making comments kind of cheekily that people find in poor taste. I mean, that's fine. You could probably do the same for any 18 to 20-year-old male, You could probably stick a camera in their face, especially if you had a camera in your face for hours a day, every day. I can tell you, I definitely would have said some, things that now people could clip and throw up and be like, look at this idiot. I was actually, a little bit of an admittance time here. I was a communist. Straight up, I was a communist when I was in high school, because you always hear people say, well, communism's a perfect form of government. And I just kind of took that and ran with it for a while. As you can see now, I'm a libertarian, which is, free markets, and it's completely different than a communist ideology. And that's how much I have changed personally since, I was 18. So you can't really judge somebody off of their views, opinions, certainly not off jokes they make when they're 18. I mean, if you ever hear 18-year-old kids talking in public, they say some pretty stupid things, but everyone does when they're 18. So leave the guy alone. I think this canceling too had an effect on Nick. It's certainly shaped who he is today. We can see in interviews, he mentions it in the Tucker interview. He mentions it to Candace. He mentions it to Dave Smith, that they are still in, or they're in the club, or he'll say, I'm not on the team. What he means is he was completely canceled. I mean, they did everything but try to assassinate him, right? And these other people, Candace Owens and Tucker and Dave, they're able to still have a life. They're able to still do their shows. They have, by the time they're canceled, they have a decent following. I mean, Tucker, all of America knew who Tucker was when he started his YouTube channel. Candace had a huge following before she went off and did her own thing, right? Nick didn't. Nick had to pull himself up from his bootstraps, streaming on Cozy TV, with his clips being shared in obscure Reddit chats and 4chan. I mean, that was his upbringing. And he does have a bit of resentment for that. And if you listen to him, he kind of looks at these people that are on the in crowd a little bit differently, because he experienced such an intense level of cancellation. I think maybe the attitude he has is, I walked so you could run, right? Like, Nick was the first person to, when he experienced this level of cancellation over essentially having an anti-Israeli, America first, we shouldn't support Israel position. He was the first person when he got canceled to say, actually, no, I'm not backing down on this. I am doubling down. And then he went down on his show and just kept pushing. And he pushed. I mean, they kept trying to cancel him. They kept doing things to him while he was streaming on Cozy TV, to get him canceled. So I think there is a bit of an attitude from Nick of, I was the first. I was the trailblazer. I was the one that experienced the harshest form of cancelization, so that Candace Owens can come on every night for an hour and talk about Israel. So I think that's some of where Nick's attitude on these things comes from. Right or wrong, that is what it is. He also talks about, if you listen to, he doesn't have a lot of friends. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He talks about it. He says, what am I going to do? Make a Tinder account, and then people are going to take screenshots of it and they're going to share it. Or, he's probably worried about being honeypotted. So as far as I know, he hasn't had a girlfriend this whole time, and he's nervous of friends because what if they're intelligence assets? What if they're being paid to gather information on him? I mean, he is a huge opposition to, there's the mainstream line of thought, there's controlled opposition, right? And then there like Fox News, I guess. And then there's real opposition. Nick is real opposition. He is uncontrolled real opposition, and he is under threat of being spied on, of being honeypotted by, hot Mossad girlfriends. That shit's real. And imagine living like that. Imagine living such a paranoid life that you don't know if people that come up and talk to you on the street try to be your friends. You don't know if, you get inboxed from people from your past on Facebook or something. You're sitting there thinking, what if they're CIA? What if they're Mossad? Some girl smiles at you at the grocery store and says hi, and you're thinking, oh my God, what if they're honeypotting me? I mean, that's an incredible amount of paranoia to be dealing with constantly. So just to put you in Nick's headspace a little bit, and especially now, I mean, especially now where Nick's at, he's in even more danger of these kind of things happening than he was, say 5 years ago. Also, I will just point out too, Nick doesn't have a blue check mark on Twitter. For a while, I thought he was just doing this to be cheeky or edgy or whatever, like, ha ha ha, Elon, I don't need your blue check mark. He's actually not allowed to have a blue check mark. I saw him talk about it once. I think somebody asked a question on one of his streams and they said, why don't you have a blue check mark? And he says, well, I'm not allowed to. He says when he goes to the thing, when he clicks on the option to have a blue check mark, it says, I'm sorry, this option's not available at this time, with no reason given. So that's like a personal thing that's been done to him. That's like a custom, like, there's no broad Twitter policy that he's breaking there. That's literally somebody in X's office or Twitter's office going in and specifically saying, this account here, do not let it have a blue check mark, which, Tucker's got a blue check mark on X. Candace Owens has a blue check mark on X. Dave Smith has a blue check mark on X. Like, all these people do, but he's not allowed to because of some of these legacy hits that have been done on him, because of this cancellation attempt and these clips of him from, almost 10 years ago at this point, when he was 18, making some edgy kind of jokes and crude remarks. So point that out too when Nick talks about people being part of the club. That's another thing he's talking about. I'm sure his Twitter reach is custom throttled too, and he's still got 1 million followers. Even with this throttling of his account, even with him not being allowed to have a blue check mark, he's still, just completely organically getting engagement on Twitter. So that should be pointed out too.
So then, what do you do? You're failing in school. Your show just got canceled. What's your plan now?
So I dropped out.
College.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then I applied for a job at the Leadership Institute. That was kind of the next big saga.
But you didn't get that job.
No, I did not get the job.
Why?
And I applied for this field rep job. It was this 2-week training. And I go there, and on the first day of the whole thing, they go around the room of all the prospective applicants. It's like a big tryout, basically, for 2 weeks. And they wanted to get everybody to break the ice and know each other. So we did introductions. They said, say your name, how old you are, and why you're a conservative. So you go around the room and you hear stuff about small government, free markets, personal responsibility, that sort of thing. And they get to me and I said, well, I'm a conservative because we're losing our civilization because of mass immigration. America doesn't resemble America anymore. France is no longer France. I said, and if we don't conserve the demographics, forget about the rest. That's what we need to conserve.
This is actually something that I do agree with Nick Fuentes on, especially even as the son of an immigrant. My dad is from a Muslim country, and I bet you cannot guess which one it is. My mother's German and Irish American. But, and I will say he did it legally too. He did it legally. Just because he was so smart, he was able to immigrate here, and then the connections that he made once he was here, he had I don't know how it works today, but how he had to do it was he had to have a citizen sponsor him. He had to somebody actually had to say, I will not let this man become a financial liability living in the United States. And they had to put up, they had to tell the government how much money there was in their bank accounts. And he really, my dad really went through the ropes to become a citizen here. Now, he didn't just tie his work boots across his neck and swim across the Rio Grande. But this is something interesting that Nick's talking about here with the mass migration. It wasn't really talked about much back then, but, then once once it came out that the Obama administration, or excuse me, the Biden administration, they used an app where, to help people cross the border, and then that once they were here, these liberal cities would put them up in hotels, and then there was a whole thing of children going missing. You remember that tens of thousands of children just went missing, and like vans were picking them up at these airports and these not detention centers but holding centers. Remember those videos where people were like, "Hey, what are you doing? Where are you taking these kids?" And the people driving them were like, You're
about to run a human being over. Hey,
you got those children in there.
Who are you?
You got those smuggled children illegally. Hey, we need the police over here. They got a bunch of kids without their car seats.
Very, very weird. But just that whole situation's weird. And then what's happening in Europe is incredibly weird. Elon Musk talks about this a lot. And if you watch the Joe Rogan Elon Musk that just came out, oh my God. What Elon talks about is how voters are being imported. That at least for the Democrats in America, the theory is, let's bring in a bunch of people from Latin America who will vote Democrat because we will give them citizenship. And then you can just flood Texas with immigrants. You can flood all these areas, and then you essentially turn the entire country blue. Now, I should point out too that folks from Latin America are generally would outside the immigration issue would probably actually be conservative. Latinas are very Catholic, and that's I think they would actually identify more with the right than the left, and that might not be a great long-term strategy. Maybe for a generation, the Democrats would get more votes, but eventually, I believe most of those Latinas will turn to the right. So not a great long-term strategy, but in Europe, I really don't understand it, because they're bringing in people, in Germany and in France and Ireland and the UK. They're bringing in people from like Africa and the Middle East, people from completely different cultures. I mean, that's a completely different. I mean, Latinas and Americans, we do share a common religion. Whether they're Christians that come over here, I don't believe the Latinas that are coming over are nearly as violent as the Muslims and the North Africans or the Africans that are coming into Europe. You hear stories all the time of the huge explosion in rapes that's happened in Europe over this. I mean, it's just insane. And then to criticize it, there's been 12,000 arrests for social media posts in Britain this year. 12,000, more than Russia, more than China, more than any authoritarian regime for social media posts. I mean, I honestly don't understand how people in the UK, or I should say blokes, I don't understand how blokes in the UK even do it. Like, how do you even live in that country? How do you even, I guess, the UK has been a monarchy for so long that people there are just used to it, or Elon Musk describes it as people in the English countryside are like hobbits. They don't think about the outside world much, and they just kind of smoke their pipes, and they enjoy good meals and tea time, and they don't think about the problems that are in London. But I mean, London's an incredibly unsafe city. Incredibly, you couldn't pay me enough to go to London. It is you are much safer. This is a true thing. You are orders of magnitude safer in Moscow, Russia, in St. Petersburg, than you are in London. London's very dangerous, and the government essentially does nothing about it. And this whole mass immigration thing is very weird. Some people say on the one side, I guess on the lighter end of the spectrum, they say it's about helping people, and it's about maybe importing voters, I guess, behind the veil a little bit. On the darkest side, people say it's literally about the destruction of Western civilization, which it makes you wonder why it's happening in England. It makes you wonder, what about England? Why are there so many arrests there? Why is there so many, it makes you wonder if the royal family ever really stopped ruling England. It just makes you wonder, why England? It's one of the only true monarchies left. I mean, it's still a monarchy, England. They still have a king and a queen. And, they say, oh, it's just a ceremonial role. It's just well, okay, where'd all that money go? Right? Where'd all the money from the British Empire go? Did it just go away? What are they called? The Windsors? I think that's their last name, right? The Windsors. Did they ever really stop controlling what happened to England, or was it just, they just said, all right, we'll hand over control to Parliament. We'll just kind of sit back and we'll hang out in our palaces and our castles and our estates, and we'll just chill. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to, kind of be in the public eye for a ceremonial role, or maybe they're still involved, and maybe this whole mass migration thing is a big I don't know, a big plot. I don't know. I'm just speculating. Let's get back to it. I'm ranting too much.
You say identity politics like it's a bad thing. I think identity is a reality.
Identity is a reality. Absolutely. You just can't have a country of 350 million this diverse where it's just like warring ethnicities, because then it's Rwanda soon. And, the people with the most force just kill the others. So, you can't have that here. Right?
Yeah. But I would say specifically as it pertains to, you, I think, have said it's the neocons. And I think that neoconservatism, where does it arise from? It arises from Jewish leftists who were mugged by reality when they saw the surprise attack in the Yom Kippur War.
Yeah, that's a lot of it for sure. But then, how do you explain Mike Huckabee, Ted Cruz, and there are a lot like that, John Bolton. I mean, I've known them all, George W. Bush, Karl Rove. I mean, all people I know personally who I've seen be seized by this brain virus, and they're not Jewish. Most of them are self-described Christians, and then the Christian Zionists who are, Christian Zionists. What is that?
Right.
And
I just want to take a minute to discuss something very interesting here. They bring up Christian Zionism, and there is I'm not saying that every Christian who supports the state of Israel vehemently is like this, but there is a radical sect of Christianity that supports Israel because it's in the Bible that to bring about the end of days there is the resurrection of the state of Israel and a rebuilding of the temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. For those of you that don't know, that famous wall that everyone's always praying to is part of the old Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. And currently, right on top of that temple, there is a building called the Dome of the Rock. It is the second or third most holiest place in Islam, and it's the spot where Muslims believe that Muhammad ascended to the heavens for his night journey. Inside of that building, the Dome of the Rock, there is a rock called the Holy of Holies, and that is the spot where Jews, Christians, and Muslims believe that Isaac or Abraham was going to sacrifice his son. I should know this better, but I don't. And it's also the spot where Jews, Muslims, and Christians believe that God created the world. It's like this. So it's a very, very unique place. The building, the Dome of the Rock itself, was built probably in the 12th, 13th century by I believe King Saladin, a Muslim dynasty built that Dome of the Rock there. And so there's a subsect of Christians and Jews actually that want to essentially demolish that building, the third holiest site in Islam, and rebuild the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. And they believe, the radical Christians believe, that this will bring about the end of days and Armageddon. And the second coming of Jesus Christ. So there is a very radical section that of Christianity that wants to rebuild this temple to essentially bring about, a nuclear holocaust and the second coming of Jesus. So that's something, it's not talked about much, but that is very, very real, and it does make you wonder, some of these evangelical preachers, that talk in their light voices, that, Jesus this and da-da-da, they all have, all these evangelical preachers kind of have the same voice that they use, kind of like that Brilliam Hollyhan guy, that 18-year-old pencil neck dude that's kind of got gotten popular now, how he talks, that kind of light voice. They all talk in that light voice about this kind of stuff. And really, it makes you wonder, like, do all of them believe that they're, essentially helping bring about Armageddon? I mean, that's just a weird, to want to bring about the end of days, I believe is a not a very good motivation, but it is what it is. But I do just want to point that out, that is a very real position held by tens, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people.
And I guess what I'm saying is that if you are a Jewish person in America, you're sort of, and again, it's not because they're born, but it's sort of a rational self-interest politically to say, I'm a minority. I'm a religious ethnic minority. This is not really my home. My ancestral home is in Israel. There's like a natural affinity that Jews have for Israel. And I would say on top of that, for the international Jewish community. They're extremely organized, and many of them are critical of Israel or Israel's current government or the project of Israel. But I guess what they have in common, unlike, let's say, like Singapore, for example, is that they have this international community across borders, extremely organized, that is putting the interests of themselves before the interests of their home country. And there's no other country that has a similar arrangement like that.
So this is something interesting brought up by Nick, and this was actually one of the criticisms of Zionism in the early days. A lot of Jews spoke about this when they were discussing the creation of the state of Israel. They said Jews are guests in all of these countries that they were in, all the countries in Europe and in America. They said, we are guests living in other countries, and if we create our own state, some of us will go there and live there, some of us won't. And the ones that choose to stay in the countries that we are currently in will be subject to an inherent mistrust by the natives of that country. And that's kind of what you see. That's kind of, a lot of people that support Nick Fuentes are inherently distrustful of Jews. Now, I should point out, I am not a Nick Fuentes supporter. Again, I do not believe everything he says, but this is an interesting position that he brings up. And we can actually see Mossad, the Israeli intelligence, is one of the, probably the second best intelligence agency in the world outside of the CIA. And one of the reasons they're able to be so prolific, be so successful, is the fact that they're able to recruit Jewish people that live in all of these other countries to work as assets for them, whether it's people that work in finance or education or business. They're able to these Mossad agents can go to them and say, hey, you should be loyal to the country where most of your people are living. You should work for us. You should pass information to us. We see it in the U.S. There's what's that guy's name? John Pollard. He worked as an intelligence analyst in the United States, and he was Jewish, and he passed intelligence information on to the state of Israel. And most of the time, actually, if you look, infiltrations of other countries happen from foreign nationals. Most of the time, it's Chinese nationals living in the United States that will be able to get recruited by the Chinese intelligence agency to work for them, because they can kind of pull at their heartstrings and say, hey, you're Chinese, help your home country. You shouldn't be loyal to America, you should be loyal to China. And the same goes for every country. The same goes for Russia, the same goes for France, Britain, you name the country, and that's a common tactic used by that country's intelligence agencies. Other tactics include if you need money, if you're in financial hardship, a foreign intelligence agency, you need money, and you work in a position where a foreign intelligence agency wants information that you have. You work for a defense contractor, and the Chinese want information on a missile that you're developing. They want engineering technical specifications on a missile, right? And let's say you're in credit card debt, and so that the Chinese intel agency finds out about this, and they can say, hey, we'll give you, however much money. I don't know. I've never been approached by an intelligence agency, but they say, we'll give you this amount of money if you pass this information to us, right? So that's another tactic used. And then the third is obviously blackmail. just like Mr. Epstein, right? They catch you doing something. Maybe they get you with a prostitute. Maybe they take pictures with you. Maybe they take pictures of you engaged in illegal activity. And then they say, all right, now, then they, have a meeting with you, and they pass a folder to you across the table that has pictures of you doing something illegal in it, whatever that might be. Let your imagination run wild on that. And they say, all right, now you're going to help us because we have this information on you. So those are the three main tactics that are used. It has been said, I've seen ex-CIA employees come on podcasts and they say, oh, we as Americans, we don't really use blackmail, and it's the least effective way to get an asset because that asset can actually turn on you. They can become a double agent. They can start working for the adversarial foreign intelligence agency. Or they'll just get very resentful of the fact that they're being blackmailed. I don't know how much I believe that. You got to take these CIA agents, ex-CIA agents going on podcasts and talking about their experience. You have to take that with a grain of salt because, first of all, they probably wouldn't be talking about everything that they're talking about without the blessing of their former employer. I cannot see the CIA letting former agents go out and talk about the real juicy nitty-gritty stuff just on their own. So I believe all these people do have the blessings of the CIA to talk about this, but interesting spin-off there on intelligence agencies. If you guys enjoy the content and the perspectives, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.
What I would like is for the U.S. government to not be influenced by these kinds of foreign allegiances, not with money that comes from, American citizens like Sheldon Adelson, not from foreign lobbyists. So, in terms of tangible things, I don't think we disagree on any of it, like registering AIPAC and FARA, banning dual citizenship. Like, I'm basically in agreement.
I think 80% of the public agrees with those things.
So
that's kind of what gets me a little bit annoyed. It's like, these are, like America First, the concept, it's the most popular, self-evidently true idea you could have. Like, don't let foreign powers, especially tiny ones far away, control your country. Like, of course not. Everyone agrees with that on both sides.
Yeah.
So the trick is not to let that idea get subverted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think we agree on that.
But it's subverted when they're like, that's hate. No, that's hate. It's not hate.
Yeah. Well, and, here's what I will say. I think that there is increasingly a contingent, because what you're talking about exists. When you say that there are people that legitimately detract from this, there is legitimate racial hatred out there.
Big time.
And it's growing. And
I know.
People on our side are afraid to talk about it because they know, like you said, they're going to get called a cuck or a squish or whatever. And I agree with you. The people that are detracting from that need to be called out. And I think there should be no harbor for cruelty, hatred, prejudice, those kinds of things.
And some of them, I'm sorry.
So just listen to that statement there by Nick. Nick is called all sorts of things. He's called, racist. He's called genocidal, a maniac. He calls for, the extermination of all these people or whatever. Listen to that statement that he just made there. That does not seem like somebody who is incredibly radical to me. It seems like he's, his Christian faith is actually important to him. In the Dave Smith interview, there's a clip where they talk about Nick called out some people that were driving around and they were finding I believe Orthodox Hasidic Jews, that were dressed in the traditional hat and the hair here, the long coat. I don't know what you call all that, but people were driving around and finding these people and squirting them with squirt guns as like a funny internet thing. And Nick called that out and said the words he used on the interview was, that's bullshit. And it's denying people basic human rights. He's not, Nick Fuentes is not a genocidal maniac by any stretch. If you can find these clips of him from 10 years ago where he's making crude jokes or whatever. I would argue that everybody made crude jokes when they were 18 or 19. And, this idea that we need to keep judging people that every single thing that you have said in your life is should affect you decades later. In this age of the internet, we can't have that. There has to be a recognition of we are all human and we all make mistakes. right? Pretty much the only person that people will ever agree on was perfect and never made mistakes. He was born 2,025 years ago in Bethlehem, right? So nobody's perfect, and we need to get past this idea of continuing to judge people for their past jokes or whatever.
But you had a real assassination attempt, like an actual one, which got no publicity that I recall. What happened?
Yeah, well, it was after the election last year. I put out this tweet and I said, "Your body, my choice" on election night. And, I wasn't, look, I'm not going to apologize for it, but I thought it was like it's like a lame joke. It's kind of like the most obvious turn of phrase.
It's a college joke.
So it got 100 million impressions on Twitter, and people were saying on the news that kids were saying it in school. It was on like the news that in middle schools and high schools, the boys were saying that to the girls, "Your body, my choice." So it became this thing where it's like, he's creating this toxic environment for women. So the internet lost its mind, and people then started posting my address online because they were so unhappy with the tweet. And so on TikTok and on Twitter, a screenshot of my address, my phone number, all my personal information, it went viral. And when I say viral, I mean there were multiple tweets that got 20 million views with my whole readout, all my information. And someone shows up to my house, some weird looking guy shows up to my house and just walks through the yard, walks through the gangway into the backyard, and is just circling my house and then goes away. So we call the cops, me and my producer, and we said, maybe we shouldn't do a show tonight. And that weekend, we hired private security just for the weekend, like 200 people.
You didn't have security?
No, I don't have security. Well, I didn't then.
Of any kind?
I didn't have cameras or anything even. I had nothing.
Okay.
I was raw dogging it. Yeah, which was not smart, maybe, but never had a problem like that.
I've always lived that way too.
Yeah. But so that weekend, we hired a security guard just to park his car outside the house and monitor things. Literally 200 people came.
To your house?
Yes. Not all at once, but one after the other. Driving by, yelling, walking by, throwing eggs. Multiple people threw eggs at my house, ordering pizzas, ordering DoorDash, whatever, walking through the gangway. It was like a war zone. Like this security guard was yelling at people all night, and it went on all weekend. And then it went on throughout the next week and the next weekend. And it was bad. I got out of my house. I went to a hotel for a week while this was happening, waited for it to blow over.
You do your show from the hotel?
No, I took a week off.
Wow. Did you announce any of this in public?
No, I had to keep it very...
Why?
I didn't want to track more of it.
Yeah.
Because if you say, "Oh, they're here," then people go, "Oh, no, we got to keep up the pressure,
right,
or turn it up." And people at that time were talking about burning my house down. Like on TikTok, there were viral videos of people saying, "We're going to burn his house down." And then they doxed my parents' address. People are showing up to my parents' house. It got really bad. And eventually it just blew over. About a month passed. And at that time, so it was like late December. It's actually funny. It was December 18th. I remember because that's an important date to me. And it's Joseph Stalin's birthday.
Oh.
I'm a fan.
You're a fan of Stalin's?
Mm-hmm. Always an admirer. But we don't need to go into that. I guess.
Well, that's okay. Let's get back. We'll circle back to that.
So, spoiler alert: Nick and Tucker never circle back on that, and that's one of the clips from this interview where people keep pulling that up and saying, "Oh, Nick said he's a supporter of Stalin. He's a supporter of Stalin. What does that mean?" Stalin is a very controversial figure. I am personally not a fan of Stalin. There's lots of evidence that Stalin and the Soviet Union killed more people during World War II than any other regime involved in that conflict. The numbers aren't well documented from Stalin. It's like literally between like, I don't know, it's like 3 million and 60 million. I mean, it's a huge gap. You really have a situation of the fox in charge of the chicken coop on that one. You're talking about the 1940s Soviet government keeping track of what happened at the time. But Stalin was responsible for a huge famine in the Ukraine, one of the largest wheat producers in Europe. It's like Europe's breadbasket, the Ukraine, and they couldn't get food for a while, and that was an artificial famine brought on by Stalin and the Soviet Union to, I don't know to what end, but it did kill lots of people. And Stalin is looked at as kind of a genocidal maniac. You want to talk? We'll just go on a thing here. The ideology that has killed the most people, bar none, is communism. You talk about Stalin, the Soviet Union, Vietnam, Mao Zedong in China, and the Cultural Revolution. Communism has killed so many people. But here's what's interesting: to be called a fascist, to be called a Nazi, to be called Hitler is like toxic. Like, we view that as like one of the worst. Like, oh, the fascist. Fascism, to me, has no real threat, because like, if you come out as a politician and you say, I'm a fascist, I think we need a far right military ethno state, no one's gonna follow you. No, everyone's gonna be like, that guy's a kook, right? But if you come out and you say, I'm a socialist or I'm a communist, that still has broad appeal. It pulls at people's heartstrings. And communism is still very much alive today. There are people that advocate for communism here in this country freely, right? You could walk around wearing a shirt with a hammer and a sickle on it, or a picture of Che Guevara's face, and it be fine, And that's something that I find very interesting, because communism is extremely, extremely dangerous. You have to understand that communism in practice cannot achieve its goals without brutal government crackdowns, without rounding people up that don't agree with the message and executing them. Now, why does Nick Fuentes support Stalin? I'm not sure. But one thing that I could say is Stalin rapidly industrialized Russia. He took a country that was mostly... Russia's always been pretty backwards, but at the time, the feudal system had lasted in Russia much, much longer than it lasted in Europe. The story that I hear is that the Russian peasants were much more spaced out. Russia's very big, and information and can't move as fast as it did in Europe. Newspapers and print and ideas just didn't move as fast in Russia as it did everywhere else. So Russia lagged behind a little bit. And there has been an argument made that nobody besides someone like a Joseph Stalin could have industrialized Russia like he did. And if Russia hadn't industrialized, if Russia had stayed a country of, peasants or whatever, they would have been completely overrun by the Germans in World War II, okay? And they almost were. They made it pretty far into Russia. They came on the very famously the gates of Moscow, Stalingrad, and Leningrad. They were right there. And if Russia if Stalin had not brutally industrialized Russia in the 1920s, it would have been very disastrous Russia would have been defeated in World War II by the Germans. So that could be one reason why Nick Fuentes says he's a fan, quote, of Joseph Stalin. Now, me personally, if I came on a show like this, Tucker Carlson interview, and I had some sort of view like that, would I say I'm a fan of Joseph Stalin? No, probably not, because there's an argument to be made that nobody has killed more people than Joseph Stalin in the entire history of the world. Maybe Genghis Khan. But I would not say I'm a fan of Stalin. But that clip of Fuentes is very controversial, and I just wanted to provide some context there for you.
Because I woke up that day and I was like, oh, it's December 18th. And I was just very acutely aware of today's a strange day. This is the day that the attempt happened. And so nothing had been happening for weeks at this point. So elections November 3rd, month and a half has passed. Nobody's coming to my house anymore, rarely. And I'm doing my show like normal. And I'm reaching the end of the show, and I see out of the corner of my eye, I get an alert from my Ring doorbell camera that somebody's at the front door. And so I'm reading through my super chats. I'm going through live
You're
chat
on the
messages. Yeah, I'm live. And, I'm working through the messages and I'm keeping an eye on it. And I see that this guy has a loaded gun. The guy's
Starting to laugh.
Yeah, well.
So you're live, and
Yes.
you see that there's a guy with a gun outside your door.
Yes. He's got a motorcycle helmet and a backpack. He's got a gun drawn and he's knocking on the door yelling. And the thing is, I didn't want to tip him off that I knew he was there because I thought, I don't want him to get the drop on me or something. I just didn't want to give him any information about, because I don't know if he's listening to my show. If I start freaking out or cancel the show, I don't know. Maybe he knows more about my movements inside. So I keep the show going for like a minute and I wrap it up very quickly. I finish the show. My producer comes running in and I say, "Who is that? What's going on?" And he goes, "Oh, I called the cops. They're here. The guy's gone." I said, "Okay, good." So I start getting changed out of my suit and I hear gunshots go off outside.
Damn.
Yeah. And I literally jump to the ground because I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. And I step outside for a minute after the dust kind of settles and there's 10 cop cars all up and down the street and they have the whole block locked down. Police tape everywhere. There's a dozen cops. Like I said, the whole block is shut down. The alley is shut down. And they go, "Get back inside, get back inside." We have no idea what's going on. We have no idea what happened. And they wouldn't let me or my producer leave until the morning. That's how late they were there. And finally, at the end of the night, after all the cops left, I came out in the very early morning.
Did no one come and explain any of this to you?
No, nobody said anything. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And finally, I go out in the morning and I asked the guy, "Oh, okay, what happened?" He told me the story. It's what turns out that it's this young guy. He's 23 years old, white nerd, short guy. He was at U of I, University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, about 2 hours south of where I live. He killed 3 people earlier in the day. He went to his roommate's house, college roommate's house, killed his roommate, killed the sister, the guy's mother, got in his car and drove directly to my house, parked outside my house, got out a .22 pistol and an automatic crossbow. Weird choice. And he knocked on the door, which is where I saw him. He went around the house. He tried the back door, tried the front door, and the cops pulled up. He took off running through the gangway, hopped the fence, ran into the neighbor's house. I guess he went into the neighbor's basement because the door was unlocked. He was hiding from the police. He shot 2 of their dogs, which is devastating. He runs back outside and the cops see him. He shoots at the cops. The cops shot him in the face and he dies on the spot.
What was his motive?
They never told me. To this day, I have no idea.
They never told you?
No.
So what contact did you have with the police after this?
They came by about a week later. Illinois State Police came to retrieve the ring camera footage of the whole incident. And so they had me download that onto a thumb drive. And that's it. I never heard from the cops, never heard from the government.
Not at all?
No, nothing.
A guy comes to murder you. He's murdered 3 other people and 2 dogs. He gets shot to death and no one bothers to tell you anything?
Nope, nothing.
So what was his motive? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea. So the story that I read online, because obviously the news followed up on this, and they said that, so he was 5'5". I guess he was involved with drugs, actually, with his roommate. They sold drugs together, something like that. They had a falling out over the drug money or something like that. The roommate beat the shit out of him so bad he dropped out of school. He had this major falling out with the roommate, but they were close, had a big falling out. The shooter took him to small claims court over some money. And I guess this guy was just in a downward spiral. He lost his job. He got in a hit and run crash and ran from the police. Then he was swearing at the cops when they showed up to arrest him. And I guess his life just kept getting worse and worse and worse. I assume he took it out on the roommate and popped off.
Yeah.
Killed the whole family.
It's horrifying, but how do you fit into that?
So this is just my opinion, speculation. This is like a month after Luigi Mangione. He had on and the shooter at my house had on a motorcycle helmet and like a costume. And so I think he was maybe like a copycat of Luigi Mangione. He thought he was going to be like a hero and assassinate some reviled political figure who was going viral at that time, being hated for that tweet. So I think that might have been the motive, but that's pure speculation. I have no idea.
I mean, it's a well-documented fact that all kinds of bad actors use unstable people for political assassinations, right? It's happened. We know it's happened.
Mm-hmm.
So
a lot to unpack here with this assassination attempt on Nick Fuentes. First of all, I had no idea that this happened to him. I knew somebody showed up once at his house. It's like some sort of woman. She just wanted to harass him, and he pepper sprayed her. Like he opened the door and was like, gotcha. You know, I thought that was the extent of the harassment this guy experienced. I had no idea that hundreds of people showed up at his house and he was the target of a legitimate assassination attempt. That's pretty crazy. It is technically free speech or protected speech to, quote, dox someone. When you dox them, you're like, if somebody were to dox me, they would find out my, real name and my real address, my real phone number, all sorts of personal information and put it out there. I guess that's technically these days protected free speech, but I think we have to realize that some of these people, public figures or, famous people, famous YouTubers, influencers are actually under threat. I mean, not only do people, legitimately hate you and want to do harm to you, but there's stalkers out there, especially for women, female influencers, I'm sure, have guys that just legitimately stalk them, and people that think they have a personal relationship with you, people that think that you post stuff just for them. I mean, there's a lot of crazy people out there. And I think that doxing someone's personal information, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think doxing someone's personal information shouldn't be protected speech. It invites stuff like this that happened to Nick. Now, it's also interesting here, too. Tucker says it's well known that nefarious actors use unstable people for political assassinations. I want you to think back to every assassination that you can think of. Obviously Charlie Kirk with the Tyler Robinson, John Hinckley Jr., who's actually free, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. John Hinckley Jr. got out of prison a few years ago, and he's living an open life somewhere. The guy that attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan. And then he actually shot that guy, Brady, one of Reagan's friends or chiefs of staff. I don't know who he was, but the guy that they named the Brady Bill after, the gun control legislation. That guy, John Hinckley Jr., James Earl Ray, who shot MLK, Sirhan Sirhan, who shot RFK, and Lee Harvey Oswald, who allegedly shot JFK, were all lone gunmen. They were all independent, crazy people that did this. They were no affiliation to anyone else. You ever notice that? It's always a lone gunman. And it's always these crazy people with these crazy ideas. And that's what Tucker's alluding to there. It does make you wonder, has there ever been a political assassination in the United States that wasn't a lone gunman? Have they ever come out and said, yeah, this guy was involved with a conspiracy that involved, this big business and this big government agency? I mean, John Wilkes Booth, the guy who shot Lincoln, was he part of a conspiracy, or did they claim he was a lone gunman as well? I mean, notice that it is always a lone gunman. And then there's people that defend that narrative. I mean, there's people, if you go look at my video on the Charlie Kirk assassination recreation, there's all sorts of people on that video going, bullets do weird things. I'm so sick of freaking hearing that. Bullets do weird things. Shut up. Okay. I'm just going off on a tangent on this. I don't really care, but the idea that bullets do weird things. Yeah. Okay. But, a 30-06 shot at a human neck should have, it's not, if you watch the video of Charlie, he gets shot and he goes, and just falls back like that. It's just like Okay? Bullets do weird things. No. What should have happened if that was a true 30-06, it should have been like, boosh. Okay? That's what would have happened. Bullets do weird things. Get the fuck out of here with that. I'm so sick of it. And if you look, it's always bot accounts. It's always people that have no followers, people that have no videos. It's just bots, or maybe just people that are legitimately dumb and don't understand this and have never shot in their life. But if you look at the people that are commenting on that video that are hunters, that are sportsmen, former military members, they're all like, yeah, no way, it's not a 30-06. The people that are on there that are saying bullets do weird things, you can't say for sure, we don't know 100% what kind of ammo it was. Like, are you legitimately saying that if someone's going to go out and do an assassination attempt, that they're going to get some sort of low powder subsonic castrated round? They're not going to go to Walmart. Okay, because this is America, right? We can just go to Walmart and buy ammunition with our couple pounds of chicken and a 12-pack of Coke. We can go buy some 30-06 bullets. Someone's not going to buy that bullet that's going to be 10 times as effective as maybe he was using a hand load from his grandfather that was subsonic and a target load because he was afraid of the recoil. Maybe he was using surplus World War II ammo because, that's what he's going to be someone that's smart enough to pull off this huge plan, entry and exit plan, and conceal himself and assemble his rifle and evade the police for days. He's going to pull all of that off, but he's not going to go to Walmart and buy a fresh pack of 30-06 hunting ammo. Get the fuck out of here. Legitimately, get the fuck out of here. That is such a stupid opinion. Like the way that people will just cling to an official narrative like it's their life. Like their life depends on it. I think maybe it's just so scary to think that the government could lie to you, right? It's just to actually think that the government would be untruthful to you and would lie to you, would lie to your face, to think about things like, potentially 9/11 as a false flag and say that that's just so scary for some people. That it once you admit that the government does lie to you, once you admit that what you hear on the news is propaganda and not real information, once you come to accept that, it's just such a scary world that you live in. Some people just can't accept that. Some people will just, it's like the Matrix, right? Where Morpheus tells Neo, there's people that are so hopelessly dependent on the Matrix, on official government narratives, on news media analysis of things, that they will fight tooth and nail to defend it. I think that's why. It's some people can't handle the truth and they'll just be forever asleep. If you guys enjoy my rants, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get back to the interview.
Like Luigi Mangione or Charlie Kirk or these school shootings, there is something going on with these kids. It's nihilism. It's these people that are maybe mentally defective, extremely online. I think there's like a real problem there. And I don't doubt that sometimes these people are involved with maybe a foreign government or they're being groomed or put up to it by an operative. But I think to assume that it's always that ignores that, like, there's a very real problem of nihilistic, surrealist violence that comes from young people. Either they're medicated by a therapist with SSRIs or they self-medicate, which is extremely common with alcohol, weed, which is extremely potent now, and you could get THC from like a vape pen. So it's very powerful, very accessible. When I was in high school, my stoner friends would have to like go on a walk to the park and roll a joint. Now, with the vape, you can hit that anywhere, I guess.
Of course.
It's very discreet. They also do psychedelics. I think that's a huge part of it. And
how is that a huge part of it?
I think that a lot of them get turned on. They'll do alcohol, marijuana, and then I think they get into psychedelics like LSD or MDMA. And I think those things induce psychosis. These psychoactive drugs, whether it's marijuana by itself or it's LSD, I think they tend to induce psychosis and exacerbate those like existing problems. And basically what happens, I would say that is maybe the next step. And then the other ingredient that's always there is, although they don't have a social life in the real world, they have a social life on the internet.
Yes.
And so they're deeply involved in obscure internet forums, Discord, gaming communities. So increasingly, ChatGPT is inducing psychosis. People talk to ChatGPT all day, all night. And you basically have, between the three of these things, they kind of go into like a different world. Between the psychoactive substances, the make-believe reality of the internet, totally disconnected from the real world, I think they enter into like this delusional state. And I think that's where that shooter in Minneapolis, I think that's what that was. I think if Tyler Robinson is found guilty, there's been some interesting screenshots about him and his transgender boyfriend. It's the same story there, if that's true. And I would imagine it was not dissimilar with the guy that showed up and tried to kill me. I think those are always the ingredients that produce that kind of violence.
It's interesting, your audience, as I imagine it, I've never seen any of your numbers. I don't even know how big your audience is. It seems big to me, but I think of them as young men. Mm-hmm. That's the bulk of your audience, right?
Yes.
And yet here you are criticizing weed and video games and the internet, and you work on the internet. You are a creation. I mean, you wouldn't exist without the internet, of course. You didn't get a job at NBC News. So what kind of reaction do you get when you criticize weed, gaming, and the internet to young men?
A lot of them agree with it because they get it. It's their life. A lot of them, that's their life. Their life is, and another thing we didn't even bring up is the porn thing, which is there also. This is their life. Weed, gaming, porn. And I think they know it's bad. I think they know there's like some sense of guilt. And so it's interesting. I would say it's maybe an 80-20 split, where 20% say, oh, you're against weed? Not cool, man. It's just a plant. Well, they're very defensive about it, about these addictions. And I think 80% say, I know I have a problem. Like, I have a guilty conscience. I know it's bad. I know it's terrible.
Why are you against weed?
Because I think that it's compromises the integrity of your mental faculties. I think there's something deeply wrong with that. When you, I'm against alcohol too. I think it's wrong to numb pain. I think pain is a part of life. I think sobriety is should be experienced. And I think that weed is even worse because I think that, one, it's very dangerous. There's a lot of numbers now out of California and Washington that people are going to the hospital for psychosis. People are going crazy because of it.
It's also more subtle and therefore more insidious. Like you can't, I've done it. If you have a 12-pack for breakfast, everyone knows. But if you take a hit of the dab pen, nobody knows. Mm-hmm. So you can use it all the time.
Yeah, and it makes you a loser. It makes you lazy. People that are addicted to weed are not motivated, don't care about anything other than weed. There's sort of an irony there where I used to hang out with a lot of stoners in high school. I never smoked weed, but all my friends did. And they were so chill and relaxed and didn't care about anything. But if you criticized weed, they would freak out and get extremely defensive.
Yes, I've noticed.
Right? If you insinuate that it's addictive, if you say it's a problem, they get very junkie behavior. And so I've always hated it. I think it's disgusting.
So I had no idea that Nick Fuentes had this opinion on marijuana before this interview, mainly because a lot of the other interviews, the people interviewing him, he just is always on the defensive. If you watch the Candace Owens interview, they spent an hour just hashing out personal grievances. You said this, you said that, blah, blah, blah. Just boring shit that really nobody cares about besides the two of them. So this is, very commendable of Tucker again for letting Nick just speak about the things that he believes in. I will say on the marijuana thing, I will say from personal experience on the marijuana thing, when I was 18, 19, I had a friend who actually became schizophrenic after he smoked. But it was at the time. We're talking over a decade ago. At the time, you didn't really have dab. Like dabs were first. The concentrates were first coming around. He smoked something. It was called hash oil, but would have been like an early form of a dab. It was at a music festival. I think this is Wakarusa, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if Wakarusa is still even a festival, but he went to Wakarusa, smoked hash oil, and essentially went crazy. And he still is. He still battles with schizophrenia today. As far as I'm concerned, I don't actually know 100%. But that is a common thing that you can hear. Schizophrenia typically starts in early adulthood like that, and marijuana can exacerbate it and can kind of trigger those symptoms. So that is a very real thing. Also, there are people, some people love weed. I've known people that can smoke and smoke and smoke and inhale it constantly and it not affect them. Some people like to take a few hits, and then there's some people that, like, if they try it at all, it gives them like extreme paranoia and they don't like it, or that makes them black out. I've heard people say that. So it is it's not necessarily this big innocent thing that, kind of that was the attitude maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago of like, oh, come on, man, it's just a plant. That there is more to it than that, and it is interesting that Nick brings that up. I do not personally think that marijuana should be illegal. You're wasting a lot of police resources. You're putting people in jail. You're affecting people's lives for something that they're doing that's not affecting anyone else. I mean, really, if you're a drug addict in general, you're not affecting anyone else. You're affecting yourself. But I mean, for there to be a crime, there has to be a victim. To accuse somebody of a crime, you have to be impeding somebody else's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Things like drugs, things like prostitution, they don't do that. You're not affecting anyone but yourself, essentially. You can call them moral declines, you can call them not good for your soul, whatever. That's all fine and dandy, but the idea that we need to legislate morality, first of all, it never works. If there's a demand for something, there will always be a market for it. Somebody will supply it. In the United States, drugs are illegal, and largely the Mexican cartels have supplied the Americans with drugs. And now, as we can see in Mexico, these cartels are essentially paramilitary organizations. They rival the Mexican government in military strength, to the point where there's areas in Mexico that are effectively owned by the cartel, where they have sovereignty. They're like their own nation, right? So, but very interesting that Nick has that opinion on weed. I did not know that.
What is porn exactly? Like, describe how available is porn? What is it? I know what porn is, but like you said, it's a huge factor in the lives of young men and a bad factor. Why?
Well, this is another thing where it's reality distortion. That's kind of the theme. Just like psychedelics distort reality, just like a kind of internet society is a form of delusion, so is porn, in the sense that, a lot of people maybe don't realize, and we talked about this a little bit, people are getting turned on to porn when they're like 10 years old. And when you are going through puberty, when you're developing your sexual faculties, how could you stay away from that? Every kid has a phone, every kid has an iPad, and every iPad and phone is, if you know what it is, loaded up with porn. And it's infinite, and it's ubiquitous, and you can get every kind of it you want, whenever you want. It's in your pocket. And so something that is almost never talked about is that this is a generation that's totally sexually dysfunctional, I think, because of pornography. And some people are able to cope with it. Some people don't have a problem. But I think a lot of people, and maybe even a small minority, have a serious problem with it. And
How does it make people sexually dysfunctional?
I think that it's impossible for a real woman to compete with the availability and the novelty of pornography. A real woman, like, without getting graphic, she's only one person, and, you know, maybe she wants to do something sexual, maybe she doesn't. Porn is, you could have 100 different women in one sitting doing anything that whatever niche or idiosyncratic thing a person might be into, it's there. And so I think that novelty combined with that availability, it makes it so that, you know, when you think about courting a woman, juice isn't worth the squeeze. And so there's like also a problem of like erectile dysfunction, people that can't enjoy regular sex because it does not compare to the intensity, the novelty, and the availability of porn. It's hyper stimulation. And so I think that's sabotaging a lot of normal sexual relationships.
It seems like it's making a lot of people gay too.
Yeah, and trans.
You think that's true?
100%.
What is that?
I think that the novelty is a huge part of that. I think that if you are somebody that uses pornography multiple times per day, which many people do.
Actually?
Oh, absolutely.
That's a lot of jerking off.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're doing that multiple times a day, every day, for years, since you're a kid, well, eventually you get bored.
Yeah.
And you want to move on to something more extreme. And you're kind of, it operates, I think, similar to like a drug. You kind of have the same kind of resistance to it that you would to a drug, or a tolerance for it. And you're always chasing that initial feeling the first time you used it or the first time you saw a certain thing. And I think eventually you just chase more taboo, more transgressive. And I think maybe some people are more prone to that than other people, going in a really extreme direction.
Is how Charlie Sheen got AIDS, actually.
Yeah.
Through just being jaded and looking for something more transgressive. That's just a fact.
And there's something too about what it does when you look at it. Because people don't realize that it is a fundamentally different experience being involved in intercourse versus watching other people have intercourse. And I think that actually does something to you.
Tell me, what do you mean?
I think that, you know, for example, I think Steve Saylor has written about this, that there's multiple kinds of transsexuals. And he says that one kind of transsexual is somebody that likes the idea of seeing themselves as a woman. It's autogynephilia.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, one of the theories for that is you watch a man having sex with a woman that isn't you so much, you kind of achieve an identity with the woman in like a weird, sick way. You almost identify with the woman. And so there's weird things that happen when you're watching that and having such strong emotional and sexual experiences with it.
That's fascinating. I've sensed for a long time, having had a lot of young male employees mention porn as a problem. I mean, the big porn companies give visibility to foreign intel services on the back end. So that means people know what you're looking at. There's likely video and audio of you watching. So that, you know, that's like such a deal killer for me. I'm not a huge expert on the topic, but I have always sensed this was a huge deal, but I've always been too embarrassed to like do a show on it.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like you're describing something that's everywhere, that affects everybody, and that is, do you think it's related to the huge decline in like actual sex and relationships and marriage, screwed up dating? All of this derives in part from porn, do you think?
I think it's a huge part of it. It's a huge factor. And it's even on the other side too. It's become so destigmatized for women to actually participate in porn. People don't even recognize that OnlyFans is a whole separate category. It's an innovation in the realm of pornography, because you have what everyone knows as porn, which is like videos of porn stars, like dedicated career sex workers having sex in a relatively controlled environment or something like that. But then you get OnlyFans, which is like Patreon for nudes or sex. And basically, there's now a very large subculture, much larger than people want to admit, of women who the moment they turn 18, that is what they do, is they make an OnlyFans account and they become an amateur porn star. And it is completely casual. You know, because you could say that maybe 10 years ago, even at the heyday of internet porn, to be in porn, you got to be a porn star. Like that's your life and that's your career and that's who you are, and it's very shameful. With OnlyFans, it's like having a TikTok. It's like, here's my link tree, here's my Instagram account, here's my Facebook account, here's my YouTube, and here's my OnlyFans.
Why would any of this be legal?
I think that, well, there's, like you indicated, maybe there's an intelligence benefit to that.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a political benefit to that. I think that...
Well, why wouldn't you arrest the people who run something like that?
They should be. If you had a Christian government...
Or how about just a government that cares about its people? I mean, is Iran a bigger threat or is OnlyFans? Iran's not turning my daughters to prostitution that I'm aware of.
Right.
Right? I mean, that seems like one of the worst things that could happen to any society.
Oh, absolutely.
So how big is the support for that? Like if a candidate were to come out and say, we ought to arrest the guys who own MindGeek, which is the biggest, I think it's the biggest porn supplier in the world, or the guys who run OnlyFans, what would the reaction be among, I don't know, people under 50?
I think there would be broad support for that.
Really?
I do, actually, yes.
I hope someone will say that. And
someone needs to.
I hope someone arrests them, like right away.
Yeah. That was actually
seizes their assets and puts them in prison.
Seizes their bodies and puts them in jail. Yeah, I mean.
The owners of that, people who are, I mean, talk about human trafficking.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I thought we were against human trafficking.
Yeah. Well,
so you think that young people, because you always think of young people as so liberal, but like, no, they wouldn't think that was crazy?
No, I think especially among young men, they know it's a problem. It's ruining their lives.
Crazy opinion there by Nick. I had no idea that he had that stance on porn and pornography. It should just be pointed out too. Nick he talks about it in this interview. He's never lived with a woman. I don't know what his relationship or love life is like, but I don't think he's had a girlfriend since all of this, from going to college and all of this till today. That's going to be about, I think he's 26 now, so that's about 8 years now where he hasn't been with a woman. I would imagine he's not going to admit it, but I would imagine he's been personally affected by what he's talking about here, and that's how he has such a deep, intimate knowledge of it. He brings up some interesting things. His solutions aren't quite, I don't agree with his solutions, but he does bring up some interesting things. And the first thing that he brings up is that young men going through puberty are exposed to porn right away and start looking at it. And that is a big thing. I would argue that everybody, even Generation X, grew up with, they would find a stash of their dad's Playboys in the attic. And then you get to, my generation, millennials, we were on the internet. We were exposed to internet porn, in our early teens. And I do want everyone to think about what it would be like if the first time you were ever with a woman in person was the first time you were experiencing any sort of sexual activity. If you didn't have all of this porn, what that experience your first time would have been like. It would have been almost magical. It would have been the first time you were ever seeing boobs. It would have been the first time you were ever, anything remotely sexual would be experienced firsthand, and it would be a much, much different experience than what I imagine your first experience was actually like. He calls it reality distortion, and he says that, real women can't compete with it. There's a lot that's been talked about that. I think most people agree. It is interesting that probably 10 years ago or so, there was this idea that porn and by extension masturbation wasn't bad at all. There was nothing wrong with it. And people, especially men, have come around and actually said, no, actually, this does cause issues. Actually, I am experiencing issues in real life. So interesting to see that cultural shift there, and kind of an admittance by men. I got to tell you, I have a son who's 9 years old, and I have no idea what I'm going to do as he gets a little bit older. Because he has a phone. It doesn't have service, but he has a cell phone and he has a laptop. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately of what am I going to do? Because it's impossible to think that you can filter 100% of, sexual images off. Like, he has Google. You can get on Google, you can get on YouTube even, and you can search for things and find things that are, maybe not as intense as a real porn site, but still pretty intense. Now, of course, Nick and Tucker's solution to this is, why don't we just arrest the people doing it? Why don't we just arrest the pornographers? Well, there's no real mechanism to do that. It's free speech. It's legal. It's freedom of whatever. I mean, this is America. We don't live in a place like England. We don't have 12,000 arrests this year for social media posts. We do have an inherent sense of freedom and freedom of choice in America, and there is a belief of Americans that we should be allowed to do what we want to do in the privacy of our own homes if we're not hurting anybody. And I don't know that idea of let's ban pornography or let's arrest pornographers, I don't think that has broad public support. But it is interesting. It seems like both Nick and Tucker do agree on that. I will also say that Tucker brings up the foreign intelligence connections to the largest distributors of porn. He says that they give visibility on the back end to foreign intelligence, Mossad, probably not Russian FSB, but maybe MI6 or Scotland Yard or whatever. Foreign intelligence can see what you're watching if they so desire. So that's something interesting brought up by Tucker. I didn't know that. Tucker does have himself connections to intelligence services. His father worked in the CIA. Tucker tried to join the CIA. I have a whole video on that if you're curious about Tucker's CIA connections. But Tucker, kind of involved in that world and probably has a much better grasp on these things than your average Joe Blow on the street there.
But I'm always, I think I'm just too old or something. I'm like, why is anyone married? You tell me, why aren't people married?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's the women. The women are extremely liberal. No one talks about that. Increasingly they do, especially after the last election. There's a 45-point difference between men and women. The men are extremely conservative, increasingly. The women are extremely liberal.
What are they liberal on? What issues? Like, what does that mean, liberal?
Oh, they're very feminist.
Like, actually?
Extremely feminist, yes.
They don't believe that, do they?
I think they do.
Really?
Absolutely,
How could
yes.
you believe that? I think gender roles are a construct, that none of this is inborn? Like, you'd have to be an idiot to think that.
They like the idea of it. They like because of course, I think all women naturally want strong men.
Of course, obviously.
They naturally want a Chad. They want like a tall, buff guy. But I think they like the idea of, none of them want to work either. None of them actually want to work.
No, that's what I'm saying. Of course. That's right. It's obviously true. It's always been true. Work outside the home.
Right.
They don't have enough work at home. There's a lot to do. But no, I completely agree. So that's why I question, like, they're feminists in what sense?
Yes. And, they like these vague appeals to equality. We want a chance to work and we want respect. And, ultimately, I think the whole political system is just based around women never being accountable for any of their choices. Ultimately, that seems to be that's what abortion is.
Yeah, of course.
Because 99% of abortions are elective. So they say it's an unplanned pregnancy. You had sex out of wedlock with someone you didn't intend to have kids with. So now we have to kill the kids in the womb. And, these no-fault divorce laws. These women get married to guys maybe they never intend to stay with. And then when they're out, they're done. And they want child support and they want half the stuff. And I think a lot of men are looking at women and they're very liberal. They're overweight. They have a very high estimation of themselves. I think that people call it hoflation.
Hoflation?
Yes. Their sense of their own looks and sexual value is very inflated. And so a lot of people are looking at these like frumpy, obnoxious, loudmouth, liberal women who are also very promiscuous and saying this is not actually appealing at all. And I don't want to start a family with a person
Sounds
like
awful.
this. Yeah, it is.
But if you believe in the patriarchy, as I fervently do, because it's just reality, we didn't choose the system. We were born into a system that is part of nature, can't get out of it. So if you believe that that's true, which it is, then you think that men should lead. And if it's going to be better, men should make it better because that's their job.
Right.
So you don't want to give them a pass, do you? It'd be like it's all the girls suck. So
I don't even blame it on the women, because I think that it's the incentive structures. Women are allowed to do this by the legal system, by kind of social norms. Technology is a big part of it. The attention that is available to women. Women go on Instagram and they get attention from thousands of men. So it's the incentives. But I would say that, because I hear this all the time, people say, well, the men need to step up and be better and lead the women. Easier said than done.
Of course, I agree with that.
They're at war with the system, and not even just the system, but also society. Because let's say you find one of these so-called good girls who's Christian and traditional, but through osmosis, wherever you go, she's going to be in society. She's going to be on TikTok. She's going to be on Instagram. She's going to be talking to other women. And maybe she's one way when you meet and get married, but 10 years down the road, 15 years, 20 years down the road, people change. And I think that women, as kind of the ultimate conformists, the ultimate enforcers of like social norms, I think eventually the pressure from society kind of gets to them. And a lot of them will go in a different
Depends what kind of
direction.
husbands they have. I mean, if there's real leadership at home, I don't know a single happily married woman who's liberal. Not one. I know a lot of married women. I mean, I'm 56. All the women I know are married. Mm-hmm. And every happily married woman is non-liberal. Mm-hmm. I can't even imagine. There's no category for happily married, middle-aged liberal woman. There isn't, never been one.
Right.
So no surprise there that Nick is a supporter of the patriarchy, traditional gender roles, and he has kind of this I don't know what you would call it, maybe an extreme opinion on women and how they're all bad. I think maybe this has something to do with his own experiences. I could say that not every woman is quite so toxic as he makes it out, but he does bring up some good points. One point that they bring up is social media and how easy it is for women nowadays to, if you're married or you're in a relationship and it's not going well or you're not happy, well, you can just post a chesty selfie on Facebook or Instagram and get a bunch of likes, get some comments, get some DMs, and that attention is addicting, for women. In the same way that porn can be addicting for men, attention is addicting for women, because women are hardwired to enjoy that attention and to do things to, gain attention, to peacock a little bit for men. And social media is like the ultimate peacocking. I mean, it's the equivalent of like in the 90s where a woman would walk by a construction site to get catcalled, And he brings that up, how he calls it hoflation, how women overestimate their worth, their sexual worth or whatever, their dating value, because they get so many of these comments and likes on social media from simps. So very interesting. And this is a phenomenon. This is a recent phenomenon. This isn't something that's been going on for decades. This is a very recent thing that we're dealing with, where we're seeing marriages not last very long. We're seeing dating, people don't stay together like they used to, right? And this also gets into, quote, women's liberation, where women were told, you don't want to be just a housewife. Don't you want to have a career? Don't you want to make something out of yourself? And, essentially, my opinion here, women were tricked into getting out of the house and joining the workforce. And now what has that really given us? I mean, now American households have they're two income, by and large, they're two income households, but we have a lower standard of living than our parents did. I mean, imagine that. You could, in the 60s, riding that post-World War II boom, you could graduate high school, get a job at a factory, get a wife. She could stay at home. You could raise your kids. You could have a car. You could go on vacations. You could eat decently well. And you could save money, and you could put money away for retirement, and that's all you had to do. You didn't have to do anything special. Off one income, you could do all that. There's no way you could do that today. There is no way you could maybe say an average salary at a job like that would be $45,000, $50,000. That's probably being generous. And bump it up to $60,000. It's very hard. You couldn't live a life like that on $60,000 a year. You need two incomes. right? And it's been a slow, the inflation and the buying power hasn't caught up with the wages, right? Wages and buying power don't move like this. Buying power, wages tend to stagnate, and inflation goes up. It goes like this. And that's what you've had in America over the last, 50, 60, 70 years, to where the money that we earn isn't buying as much. And so slowly we've transitioned into a two-income world, right? We've said, all right, women, come into the workforce and start pooling your resources into the household. And you would think that we would have we should be having twice as good of a life as our parents did, because it's a two-income world, right? We should be going on twice as many vacations. We should be eating twice as good, but we're not. We're arguably worse off. Things are more expensive. Healthcare is more expensive. Education is more expensive. Housing is more expensive. And you just got to ask yourself, like, was this all a big psyop? Was this all a big, we went off the gold standard. We devalued our money off of gold and put it on fiat so we could print more of it. Now we're really printing a lot of it. And where's that money going? Well, the short answer is it's being sucked up by compound interest. It's being sucked up by the people who actually have money. If you've got, let's say you've got $500 million. What do you do with it? You don't just keep $500 million in the bank. You invest it. Conservatively, you invested in certified deposits on a bank, and today you're earning 4.5-5% on those certified deposits. Or you're investing in business, or some other investment where you're earning compound interest, and that interest, that 5% a year, is just slowly, your $500 million. Becomes, even more the next year and more the next year. And over years, you're slowly amassing more wealth. And really, I believe that amassing of wealth by the ultra wealthy is what is making the buying power of our dollar go like this. I mean, it's happening in a complicated, convoluted way where people can say, oh, well, it's not exactly that. But really, I mean, what other explanation do you have? Okay. Like I said, post-World War II, you go out and get a job, one income, and you have a very decent life. And today we have two incomes, and we have a worse life. What's going on there? Something's happening. Somebody is getting rich, and it's not the average person. So that's another angle we can take with the old, feminism, women's liberation thing. It could be just a giant psyop, trick everyone into becoming a two-income household while simultaneously having a worse life than they did, 100 years ago. I rented a house from a woman. This would have been 10 years ago. She when she first got married, she had to quit her job. I think she was a nurse. She had to quit her job as a nurse because she got married. It was illegal in the United States for a woman to have a job who was married. Can you imagine that? I had no idea, but that's the way it was. She said that's why you have the stereotype of the old maid school teacher. She said because, if you kept your job as a school teacher, you couldn't get married. And arguably, probably most of them at the time were, lesbians. But I hope this has been insightful on the real Nick Fuentes. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one.